Hello, my name is Zachary Griggs, and I'm with the DataBlend team. I've been with the team for over 2 years, and I've worked with nonprofits for over a decade at this point. Today, I'm going to take you through an integration between Salesforce and Sage Intacct, specific to nonprofit organizations leveraging DataBlend. On my screen here, I'm logged into DataBlend, and I'm on what we would call our dashboard, or essentially the home base within the product. We're looking at 4 quadrants here. Upper left in this favorite section is where we have our workflows or individual integrations. The 2 that we're going to focus on today are related to donor revenue and funding sources. My donor revenue is going to be tied to Salesforce opportunities. I'm going to send that into Sage Intacct as an AR invoice. My funding source is my account in Salesforce. I'm going to send that into Intacct as a customer record that's been repurposed to be funding source. So within here for these integrations, I have the ability to click this run button here. And what that's going to do is kick off that integration ad hoc. So let's say I come in here and run my funding source. You'll now see my second quadrant, my history section, is going to tell me how is that integration progressing. In this case, it's on step 2 of 2. And it takes about a minute to go through. But what it's doing is it's going to take, you can see up top here, I have a couple different tabs open, but if I go to my first one, in Salesforce here, it's going to take these different accounts, so it's going to go pull them into DataBlend, transform them, and send in that information into Sage Intacct. Now I have the ability to choose which fields I want to update on those customer records. And if you wanted to, for whatever reason, send this into any different objects within Intacct, you could as well. So it doesn't have to be Salesforce accounts to Intacct customers. You do have the flexibility if you wanted to send it through, and you want to update a different list. Maybe your item list might be where you're tracking down that detail for individual donors. You can have that set up in that way. I'm going to go back in here to DataBlend. You can see this one is still running. So as it's going through in this ad hoc run, if you're like me, you don't want to have to click that button every time this is going to execute the integration. So you have the ability to use our schedules down here, and the schedules is going to allow you to set whatever frequency you want that integration to run. It could be once an hour, once a day, once a week, whatever makes sense for your organization and your use case. And you can also do different schedules for different integrations. So you might want your funding sources to run once a week, or you want your donor information that's going to run every day. And so you have the capability to keep those in sync at the frequency that makes sense for your business processes. And then our last quadrant is our credentials. You can see here, this is where I can see these green dots. Green is good. This is telling me that my Sage Intacct and my Salesforce logins, I have an active connection to both of those systems. So it looks like the customer integration just finished up. It took about a little over a minute to run through and sync those 2. So let's go back into Salesforce and let's pick one of these. So let's say this donor 2 here. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a change. So let's update this account name, and let's say that this is now Foundation ABC. Let's hit save here, update my Salesforce information, come back over here, and kick that off one more time. So now what this is going to do, if I go into the Intacct side, is if I go and find that specific donor 2, let's come in here. We'll let that run. So I'm just going to leave that up for a second while this finishes up and let that run through for a minute. It's going to now update that field. And as I mentioned, you can update any of those fields that exist on the customer record. You can have them synced between the 2 systems. And if you don't use account, maybe use case or use some other object, a custom object within Salesforce, not a problem. You can have it set up so the integration takes that information and then updates the applicable fields within Sage Intacct. So fully customizable as far as what objects go where and what fields get updated along the way in that integration. And while that's running, what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to take this donor revenue workflow. Let me kick that off. So you're going to notice that it's running both integrations simultaneously. There's no conflict between the 2, so you can have overlap as your integrations run through. But this is going to go, in this case, it's 3 steps. But what it's going to do is it's going to go look at Salesforce, take a look at all the different, in my case, closed won opportunities that are considered some type of donation that took place. within Salesforce that was entered. It's going to take that information, it's going to pull it into DataBlend. We're going to transform it, do a lot of what you'd think of as Excel gymnastics if you were doing this process manually. It's going to transform it into a format that Intacct can then use that information, and it's going to create a bunch of AR invoices for us on the Intacct side. You can see my funding source just finished. So I'm going to hop back to Intacct, come in here, hit enter. Now you can see donor 2, foundation ABC. So it updates as soon as it finishes. Same concept for all the other fields that are between the two systems. And if this was on a schedule, I wouldn't even need to think about it. It would just run in the background. So then, as let's say my development team is updating Salesforce with new information, or maybe I have some data getting fed into Salesforce that I want to eventually make it into Intacct, all that's going to sync between the two naturally based on whatever schedule we set. So now what we're going to do is going to go over here to the AR invoice section. Just make sure this is finished up. Yep, looks like it just finished. Come in here. You can see I have my recently modified on, so I can isolate here all my different opportunities that got fed over. And in this case, you can see about 30 of them came in. So one other feature that I do want to highlight too is, in this case, I'm posting everything to the top level within Sage Intacct. But in the event that I wanted to, let's say, post this down to individual entities, I have the ability to come into what we call our data target. That's the push into Intacct. I can click into AR invoice, and then you can see this post to multiple entities. I also have the ability to easily group these different invoices. So you might have an opportunity with 10 different lines, and you want to group it. In this case, I'm doing it based on my date, my description, and the customer, which is the customer dimension, but my donors information. But if you wanted to take it a step further, and maybe you also wanted to badge it based on, the individual line items or the type of donation that was being made, if it's an individual or corporate donation, and you have it badged that way as well, you can. Not a problem. You can add to this list. But in this case, for the multiple entities, I just simply toggle that. And then what that's going to do now is it's going to take my different invoices and it's going to post them down to the individual entities rather than at the top level. So then it allows me, if I have a multi-entity environment, to easily, using one integration, move that data to a different area of Intacct, so to speak. And I'll just let that finish running through. And we can come back over here. Yep, so we're about 30. So once that finishes, we should see a few more created in there. In this process of setting up the integration, so as I mentioned, it's fully flexible and customizable. The ability to set it up in that way is where DataBlend and the implementation team, or one of our partners, would be able to work with you to determine what is the use case and what is your business process that we're trying to automate. And then we'd be able to construct that integration for you in that way. So you don't need to change your business process to fit into an integration. The integration using DataBlend is going to be able to fit your business processes and however you need those to function. You can see my donor revenue just finished up. So I can come back over here. Let's just refresh. And I'm going to include private. And now you can see 11 of those were at the entity level, and it created them down here as well. Okay. So that is the high-level demo of what the integration between Salesforce and Intacct is capable of. There's a lot more that it can do beyond that, but these are common use cases, especially with our nonprofit clients, that come up quite often.